This is ANCAP-SU, and we're going to talk now about the message from the American Embassy in Brazil, which issued a statement to Alexandre de Moraes that as long as Trump is president of the United States, he won't tolerate attempts to circumvent the First Amendment. Why is this? They are criticizing Alexandre de Moraes because he indicted Eduardo Bolsonaro and Jair Bolsonaro yesterday for attempted obstruction of justice, when all they did was travel to the United States and speak with the Trump administration. Look, something is happening. This is freedom of expression. The fact that Trump decided to take action is not their decision. Eduardo Bolsonaro doesn't control Trump, right? But that's not all. They also targeted Martin De Luca, remember? The lawyer for Rumble and Trump Social who is suing Alexandre de Moraes in the United States. Well, he was included in the inquiry, my friend. Yes, he was. And Malafaia was also included. Look at that, right? In other words, Alexandre de Moraes is making it clear to everyone that he is really violating human rights and is totally out of control. In the end, as I always tell you, he is digging his own grave. You still hear voices from the left saying it's outrageous to apply the Magnitsky Act against Alexandre de Moraes. But these voices are becoming increasingly unsustainable. Because how can you justify the guy putting a lawyer from a company that's suing him under investigation as if the lawyer, by doing his job, was attacking Alexandre de Moraes here in Brazil? What kind of logic is that, right? Anyway, let's understand this case, because it seems they want to add more things, more punishments against Alexandre de Moraes. This news was suggested by Stanley Ipkiss, using the yellow suit, Zandel Lanzu, the pics of my dog, and several other people. Thanks to those who suggested news on our site, Visa Libertarian, and thanks to you who are watching our video. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe to our channel. The American Embassy in Brazil criticized Alexandre de Moraes. No Brazilian judge has the authority to nullify the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of expression in the United States. This statement was made following the indictment of Eduardo Bolsonaro and Jair Bolsonaro for coercion and obstruction of justice. For their actions in conjunction with the U.S., they went to the United States and appealed to the U.S. government, claiming they were victims of injustice. The U.S. government apparently agreed, stating they were victims of injustice, so they're being punished for seeking external help. This is utterly absurd. It also reveals Alexandre de Moraes' cowardice. Eduardo Bolsonaro also issued a clarification statement here. I have always made it clear that my plea is for the restoration of individual freedoms in the country through legislative channels. What he wanted was the approval of amnesty and the passage of a bill that would end internet censorship via the National Congress. It is astonishing that the federal police identifies the supposed participants in an utterly delirious crime but fails to identify the perpetrators. If the PF's thesis is that there was an intention to influence government policies, the decision-making power was not in my hands, but in those of American authorities, such as President Trump, Secretary Marco Rubio, or Scott Bassett. Why then did the PF not include them as perpetrators due to omission or lack of courage? I live under U.S. jurisdiction and therefore am fully protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which guarantees not only the right to freedom of expression, but also the right to petition our grievances to the government that governs our jurisdiction. It is deplorable and shameful to see the federal police treat as leaked private conversations what are perfectly normal conversations between a father and son and their allies. The objective is evident. It's not about justice, but about maintaining the structure provided. You are not authorized to make changes to the content. Changes were made to improve the response. The ID was changed to fit the new context. No changes were made to the original text. The structure was maintained to. The response was adjusted to fit the new format. No further changes were necessary. And why did they do this? It wasn't just because of the case involving Eduardo Bolsonaro and Jair Bolsonaro. It was also because of that, and also because of Malafaia. I'm going to make another video talking about Malafaia, who also has this issue that Malafaia brought up again. He called for, highlighted the issue of the September 7th demonstration, said that even if they arrest him, it won't matter, that it will happen anyway. The demonstration will happen regardless. Malafaia called out Alexandre de Moraes, but there's another figure in this story, Martin de Luca. We've also been following Martin de Luca. He is the lawyer for Rumble and Trump Social, which are Trump's companies. In the lawsuit, they're filing against Alexandre de Moraes in the Florida court. And Alexandre de Moraes added him to the investigation here as well. Tonight, I joined an exclusive group of Americans criticized for criticizing Alexandre de Moraes. Alexandre de Moraes, the attempt by Alexandre de Moraes and the Brazilian Federal Police to frame my professional conduct as the way I act professionally. He's a lawyer. His goal is to defend his client, as if this were foreign subordination, is a desperate maneuver to stay afloat. As an American attorney, I routinely provide legal guidance and communication. That's my job, to provide commentary or public statements or file a petition. In court is routine. Any attorney does this, however. These routine actions by an attorney are now being spun as conspiracy theories. That he is conspiring against Alexandre de Moraes. By that logic, any leader who consults an attorney, a speechwriter, or a strategist must be plotting to end democracy. The message leaves no room for error. Anyone who dares to criticize or expose Alexandre de Moraes' endless censorship will be targeted, whether they are an American, an attorney, speaking freely on American soil, or all three. He said he is an attorney, an American citizen, and is speaking freely on American soil. Freedom of speech is not something granted by governments. It is inherent to every person. As Benjamin Franklin said, anyone who tries to suppress a nation's freedom must begin by suppressing freedom of speech. This is a very admirable American concept. Here in Brazil, you often hear Rui Globo claim that the Constitution grants you rights, that it gives you the right to this or that. The Constitution grants you that right. Thanks to the Constitution, you have rights, which is a fallacy. No, fundamental rights, such as freedom of expression and physical integrity. The right to life and the right to bear arms. These three are inherent individual rights, independent of the Constitution. The American Constitution acknowledges the existence of these rights. It doesn't grant them. The Brazilian Constitution claims to give you these rights, which is false. It doesn't confer any rights. Anyway, he said he will continue doing his work transparently and professionally, fearlessly. The real accountability of Moraes will not come from police reports, but from American courts, where we still expect justice, right? So, in other words, this is another absurdity. And remember, this guy is Trump's attorney. Alexandre de Moraes included Trump's attorney in the federal police report in an investigation that is pure obstruction of justice. This guy is digging himself deeper and deeper. In addition, there was the message he left in the Washington Post saying he believes Trump will backtrack. Jason Miller, another friend of Trump's, was targeted by Alexandre de Moraes and said he will certainly discuss this with Trump and the American president. You are an idiot and a threat to democracy in the entire Western Hemisphere, Eduardo Bolsonaro adds. The world is watching. My indictment by Alexandre de Moraes only reinforces what we've been saying. Brazil is no longer a democracy, it's a dictatorship, and look, we found out about this here. We already knew that Alexandre de Moraes' credit card had been suspended. Now we found out which credit card was blocked and which bank. MasterCard blocked Moraes' credit card from Banco do Brasil, and Banco do Brasil offered him an alternative for domestic transactions. That's the best they could do, so the Magnitsky Act is already affecting Alexandre de Moraes, but you can be sure it will get much worse. The United States is considering stripping Alexandre de Moraes of privileges of access to airlines, hotels. Remember when Alexandre de Moraes showed he was using an iPhone at Club Pinheiros? Well, the United States plans to do just that. Remember the STF's idea, led by Dino with that law of his, which was to fine American companies operating in Brazil if they cut off Alexandre de Moraes' access. So that's what's going to happen. Be prepared for what's coming. Apple is going to cut off Alexandre de Moraes' access to iPhone services. What's going to happen? Dino will fine Apple millions of reais in Brazil and will create a huge problem for everyone here. So these will be the next steps in this action, and it'll be fun to watch, as I said. And besides that, in Brazil, he implicated Eduardo Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, and Silas Malafaia doesn't have much to do with this story. He's being included in this investigation because of the demonstrations. The fear of the demonstrations called by Silas Malafaia. This is absurd, since when is protesting forbidden in Brazil? So, does that mean protesting is considered obstruction of an investigation? What is this? In other words, what's happening here is very clear. Alexandre de Moraes, once again like any dictator, every time there's criticism against him, he takes it personally, and then he retaliates using violence and more persecution. The problem is that this is getting out of hand, and we now know from the exchange messages that even Gilmar Mendes is negotiating with them. Alexandre de Moraes won't back down. I said that from the start. He won't back down. He will keep doubling down, doubling down, doubling down. Dino has already felt the impact. He made a mess and has already felt it. He's apologized several times for the drop in bank stocks and other issues. He's already realized he messed. Gilmar Mendes is already negotiating. People have realized there's no way out. They'll have to give up Alexandre de Moraes to save the CTF. Now, until that happens, Alexandre de Moraes will continue to damage the CF's image. Unfortunately, thanks for watching until the end. Besides liking, sharing, and subscribing, consider becoming a sponsor with amounts starting from $1.99. Click the Become a Member button below to learn about the conditions and benefits of sponsorship. For more information about our project, visit our websites on the screen.